Alrighty, so continuing on our foundations of life, earlier I talked about building a strong spirit, and now I want to talk today about building a resilient mind and why that's important and how you can do that and how I do that. So, what I mean by resilient and a resilient mind is, a mind that's able to adapt and overcome and endure and go through traumatic situations, stressful situations, and having the ability to move through those and overcome and ultimately triumph. So that's the goal with building a resilient mind. And the big thing that no one wants to talk about, like the big elephant in the room, and really the reason why everyone is so mind-fucked nowadays, is the fact is that society is trying to fit us into a hole. We're like a square peg that they're trying to cram into a round hole. And what illustrates this really well is a book, and it was written by Aldous Huxley. It's called A Brave New World. And it's a movie, and it was recently a television show, I think a few years back. And so if you're not familiar with it, check it out. But the concept is interesting. So it's people living in the future, and they're living in this futuristic society where everyone is on drugs, everyone is drugged. There's really no sense of individuality. Everyone is part of like the herd, the group. There's certain words they can't say, like they can't say love or husband or wife or family or child. All breeding is done by the state. There's no connection between individuals. Everyone sleeps with one another. It's like this open sexual society. It's really bizarre. But that is what society wants us to become. And so what ends up happening is a person, and they call him the wild man. And he's from a society that lives outside of this futuristic, prosperous society that all these people belong to. And the wild man gets brought back to their society and is like blown away by how bizarre it is. And I don't want to explain. I don't have to explain it, but the point is that we are these wild individuals. We are from the earth. We are from nature. We are organic life beings, organic life forms. And the reason why there's so much fallout with all these mental conditions and mental problems, mental personality disorders, like narcissism, like all the things, is because they are trying to fit us into this box that we really don't belong into. And what's interesting about the movie is how they've moved so far away from nature and and where we came from, that they've really lost what it is to be human. And that is the reason why we're in the bind that we're in, why there's, why everyone is on medication, and so it's, okay, another point of the movie is everyone is medicated. And see, Aldous Huxley introduced this in the 30s, and so he was like part of, these people that are predicting the future. It's like predictive programming. They're telling you how it's going to be, and now we're living it. And I think they thought that pharmacology and, people could just consume drugs and that would fix, the mental conditions and allow them to like be, healthy citizens in this like dystopian society. But it hasn't worked. And so now they're pushing the implant, the neurochip, and check out what's going on with that thing, because Elon Musk and all those guys with the Neuralink company are really moving ahead at a rapid pace, and they're promoting, the microchip to be implanted in people's brains. And once that happens, it's pretty much game over. So the way that we solve all of this is building a resilient mind. And that is, the way I think about my mind is, it's not my brain. Obviously, your brain and your mind are similar, but like my mind is like, it's my whole, it's my sense of self, it's my being. It's like, I imagine it's like that little guy that's in there, and like, what kind of mood is that guy in, and what are the things that he's saying, and how well can I work with him? That's how I imagine the relationship with my mind. And, you can think of it however you want to, but it's important to be conscious and be aware of, this amazing tool that we have, which is our mind. And if we start thinking about ways of how we can, build resilience in our mind so that we can overcome everything that society is throwing at us, because society is all about manipulation. Everything is a mind fuck on you and me. That the human mind is it's like the most studied thing. And the whole thing is about manipulating people's minds. And what's sad is like, I am inspired to turn this YouTube channel into a business and start teaching people and educating people on how I solved my problems, overcame my narcissistic abuse, and entering into the business space and learning, because a big part of what, my method of teaching is it's a learning system. We need to be able to learn to figure out, how to solve our problems. And when you start learning about, doing business with people, it's all about manipulation. It's just all about mind fucking your customer. And, why would I want to mind fuck someone that I want to help? That doesn't make sense to me. So maybe there's like an ethical mind fucking, but in my opinion, if I'm going to have a business and want to help and improve people's lives, it's going to be built on honesty. So, I'm going to move forward the way that I feel is correct. Anyway, so society, it's all about manipulation. And what ends up happening is, we get this fallout with people's mental health in society, and we see the fallout everywhere. I mean, it's like society's collapsing in on itself because we're moving further and further away from what grounds us to reality. And so what grounds us to reality? It's nature. This is what grounds you to reality. Nature has an interesting way of interacting with humans where it gives humans, a sense of self, a sense of purpose, a sense of calmness. It's very comforting. And I'm not saying that we have to like completely go back to living, like in nature. There's a happy medium here to still having our society, but also having a strong connection to the natural world. That's fully possible. And I feel like that's going to be the main thing that builds our resilient mind. It's going to be a foot in both worlds, and it's going to be using nature as a tool. And so how do you do this? I've had a lot of experience with spending time in nature, and I was lucky enough to attend a wilderness survival school for a year. It was my last year of high school. And, the program was designed for, like troubled teens, troubled students. But my uncle knew the main founders of the program. And it was kind of like one of the first charter schools. This was back in 2000, or in 99, 2000. Anyway, for the first part of the year was a 2-week backpacking trip. And the second, at the end of the year, was a 2-week trip. So we got to spend 4 weeks in the wilderness backpacking. And this experience, if you can get into the wilderness and slap a backpack on and go trekking, it will change your life. And I was in high school, and I was still dealing with all my mental and emotional problems, from my crazy family environment. But this experience left a lasting impact on my life. And so there's a very interesting story I want to tell you. And one thing that society tells us about nature is, what's the first thing that pops into your head when someone says, hey, let's go out in the woods? A bear's going to eat me, right? But that's a lie. That is society propagandizing nature. It's not true. A bear is not going to eat you. A bear does not want to eat you. People do get eaten by bears, but the reality is bears don't want anything to do with you. But I want to tell you a story. And this happened to me when this was the last trip of my wilderness survival school. We're on a 2-week backpacking trip. And one of the parts of the trip, so we're like deep into the mountains. And we are, about a week and a half in towards the end of the trip. And we had to do these things called solos. And the instructor, the guide, would lead us out into the bush. We'd have to set up a camp and stay there for several nights. And we had our sleeping bag, we had food and water, and we had a tarp as our shelter. And the goal was to, go out there, be alone, and just be with yourself, and face yourself. And everyone was super apprehensive. So I was a group of kids, all high school age, and people were like really scared to do this. And I was apprehensive too, man. But set up my camp. It's the first night I was there, and I was sleeping, and something like walked by my camp, and I was camped next to a creek. And so naturally, wherever there's water, animals are moving through. So something came by my camp and kind of like sniffed at my head. I just had an A-frame that I was sleeping under, and I was like, whatever. I don't know what it was, and so it was all good. That next night, I'm sitting at my fire, and I'm cooking. I had like mashed potatoes, so I was cooking potatoes. I was sitting at the fire, and I was just loving it, man. It was like amazing, kicking it. And I remember, because the whole thing was like, oh, a bear is going to come get me, a bear is going to eat me. And so I had this crazy stick, and I was like, yeah, if anything comes into my camp, I'm just going to whack it with this stick. And so I was having that thought, and I'm sitting there at the fire, man. And sure enough, what happens? Yeah, a fucking bear wanders into my camp. And I'm sure it just smelled my food. So the bear wanders into the camp. And I'm sitting down at the fire. And it's like, I'm like 2 feet from the fire. And the bear wanders into the camp, and it's on the other side of the fire. So it's just like the fire is in between the bear and I. And it sits down with its back to me. And I can't move, man. Like, fuck that stick. That's not going to do anything. I cannot move. I'm sitting on the ground in my chair, and like I am frozen, and this bear is on the other side of the fire and with its back to me, and it starts rocking. And it was like grunting, and it was doing this. And I was, oh man. So guess what I did? I whistled to the bear. I was like, I whistled to the bear. That bear spins around and looks me dead in the eyes across the fire, and is like, turns around and is looking right at me across the fire. And I was just sitting there, and we were locked in this gaze. And there, there's nothing I can do. It's just frozen. And this bear is like looking at me, and like, and what are you going to do? Run away? No. I couldn't move. So we're sitting there locked in. I don't know how long it was for. It's probably only for like a minute. Then, in my mind, I telepathically tell this bear, I'm uncomfortable. Can you please leave now? As soon as I said that in my mind, that bear got up, turned around, and ran up the hill and was gone. Yeah, that was crazy. Of course, going back to meet with the group, telling the story, everyone like couldn't believe it. But what was interesting about that interaction with that bear, and really like getting a sense of that bear's personality, and even looking back on it now, I can still feel that bear was just like a child. Those animals, they're just like children. Their intellects aren't like ours. See, we're always relating to everything from our own perspective, and we don't understand, the perspective of like this bear, and really thinking back on it and thinking of what that animal was like, and it was just a curious child. But these things, nature, these are gifts from nature, and this is what builds a resilient mind. And these experiences that we have in nature, whatever they may be, they provide mental strength and toughness, and they help give us a sense of ourselves and who we are. Because as we experience these challenging situations, whatever they may be, if we choose to grow from them, like I said before, it's how we perceive it. Either we live by it or we live with this. And if we choose to live with it and move on and grow from it, it builds resiliency in our mind, and it connects us deeper to who we are, to the individual that's inside of us. And so all these opportunities, all these experiences, these challenges that we face in life, they're all opportunities to grow and build resilience. So if you're having a hard time, the mindset you can shift your mindset and see this as an opportunity to grow and build resilience in your mind. So there's a few other things to really building a resilient mind and building a healthy mind. And there's two more parts to this. The other thing is you have to eat a clean diet. You stop eating fucking junk food. Stop eating fast food. Stop eating garbage. One of the best investments you can fucking make is buying clean, whole foods. That's it. You try to buy organic as much as possible. But if you can't afford organic food, just shoot for clean, whole foods. And you don't have to be vegetarian or vegan or raw food or whatever. If you're into that, that's fine. But just think of, I want clean meat, vegetables, some dairy that's minorly processed. You just want to avoid anything processed, anything fast food, and limit your sugar, and look into toxic seed oils. Try to really eat clean food. That will help your mental health, your mind. That will help your mind tremendously, because so much of the crappy food that people eat, they pay a heavy mental toll. It makes them feel like shit. It's bad for your mental health. You're not going to build a resilient mind if you are eating junk all day. So, like I said, it's one of the best investments you can make. Forget investing in the fucking stock market. Invest in buying food. I spend like $3,500 a month on food for the family because we want to eat clean, natural, organic food. And I want the kids to grow up eating really high quality food, because that's going to set the stage for their whole life. And you can turn a lot of your problems around by just eating clean, whole foods. It's that simple. Every meal is a choice. Just keep that in mind. That is a huge part of building a good mental health, a resilient mind. The other part is, there's actually, so there's three parts. There's a few more parts. Sorry, this is on the fly. I mean, you know how this is. I just channel all this, so I'm bringing it through. So obviously the food. The next is going to be exercise. Exercise is so good for your mind. And if you're not physically able to hit the gym and go on a bike ride, just walking. Walking is, a lot of people can walk. If you can't walk, just get out somehow. Get fresh air, get the sun. You have to move your body. And if you start studying, the different brain chemicals, and there's a great book that I've mentioned several times, The Dose Effect, and I'll link it in the description. It really talks about, mental health and brain chemistry, and how positive, exercise and just movement is. So you have to move, you have to walk, run, lift weights, just get out, swim, jump in the river, exercise is key. Okay, the other part is, we talked about exercising our body. We have to exercise our brain and exercise our mind. And I do this in 3 ways. First, read. Just start reading. Start reading books. Honestly, the answers that you're looking for are in books. Books are this amazing resource and tool that I didn't read for years and years and years. And I recently, within the last year, or maybe it's been the last 2 years, I read every single day. I wake up at 4 a.m. and I read for 1 hour. I have been crushing books. I have read more books in my life in this last couple years than I'd ever imagined. I've read, and what's interesting, you start reading books and they lead you to more books and more topics, and I've just been plowing through books, and it's amazing. That is really important, is the exercise for our brain and our mind. So reading is a huge one. Another one is writing. I don't write enough. I should be writing a lot more. And I try to force myself to write. And really my biggest hang up with my writing is I'm not great at spelling. And so I end up writing and then just like scribbling the word, and then I just get discouraged, and but that's my own hang up, and I can improve that. But writing is really a huge thing too. And if you can journal, kind of write your thoughts, or what I like to do is when I'm learning something, I write what I'm learning. Another thing, playing music, which is a huge way, for your mind and your soul, your everything. Music is a huge one too. When I'd want to learn a song, I would write the lyrics out. Like I'd get the tablature or whatever, and I'd see the chord changes, and I'd learn the song, and then I'd write all the lyrics, and that would help me remember it. So writing is huge. Music I just mentioned. If you play an instrument, that's great. If you don't, I'd encourage you to think about learning one. I'm going to be offering music lessons. I feel like it's a huge part of the healing process, and look for that in the future. But that's a huge thing, boosting, your mind and your mental health. I guess there's a bunch of like little things. Sleep is another big one. You have to consider: are you getting good sleep? This really adds up. Try to get good sleep. If you're not sleeping well, I can give you some tips, just things that help improve my sleep. If I would physically really work hard, if you're kind of a sedentary person and you're not sleeping well, I would start exercising, moving your body, and try and tire yourself out. You will sleep really well. Stop eating so late at night. Don't sleep with any kind of devices in your room. Don't have any light in your room. Kill the light. That really helps with sleeping. Sleep in a dark environment. And just try to have where you're sleeping comfortable and calm and clean, and it'll help you get good sleep. But this is a big one, and I think it's really easy to make this real complicated, and a bunch of like philosophers and science guys and PhDs and all this bullshit. It's really not. We can simplify all this stuff to where you can understand it, I can understand it, and a big part of that is just using our mind and using our brain and just thinking and reasoning. Like taking in ideas and using your own mind to think about these concepts. Like think about what I'm talking about with you today. Take that in and reason it out. Bounce it off of your own life experiences, and see if it resonates with you. If it doesn't, think about that. And that's a big part of this too, is using this resource that we have. And in this day and age of constant distraction, it's moving us further and further away from who we truly are. Because every day, every moment is an opportunity to connect with yourself, and you are in there, and you have to interact with yourself, and that's spending time in nature alone, and spending time thinking and reasoning, and doing all these things that stimulate you in a positive way. So yeah, it can be super complicated, but it's really not. We have to get over the fact that there's all these experts that have to tell us how to think. You have a brain, you have a mind, you have a soul, you have a body, you have all these things already. You're already an expert. You have all this. We just have to take the time and spend the time distraction-free in the natural world, and this will start coming back to us. And we can completely turn these things around. And one of you is going to have a great idea of how to turn this around. And what I'm doing right now was my idea. Sharing what I've experienced, how I've overcome, these big hurdles in life, and just sharing what I know. And I know that one of you, possibly you, will have a great idea to turn the ship around. So that's the goal. Anyway, building a resilient mind. Think about it, dwell on it. think about, all these things that I mentioned is what I do, and you will find what's right for you. But we have to have a resilient mind if we want to make it through what's being thrown at us and keep our sense of self and keep our sanity. Because I'm seeing it every single day, the psychosis and the mental strain that everyone is under. And that's why escapism is so big. Look around. Everyone wants to fucking escape because it's a nightmare. We're living in this nightmare world. And at the same time, it's this beautiful, amazing place full of connection and just like amazement and wonder and beauty. But on the other side, it's like this terrible, like, torture den that we're all locked in. So building the resilient mind will help you navigate that, and you'll be able to see through all the bullshit and just get a connection and a grounded sense in reality. That's what we're after. What is real? What is not real? What is good? What is bad? It's all really simple. So, anyway, as always, I appreciate your time, and thanks for sticking with me. And, things are looking up. Anyway, have a good rest of your day. Okay.